Alright, my name is Megan Stetler, and I'm here to interview Brent Roberts for the Arizona History Project. Hello, Brent. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for asking me.
Alright, first off, I'd like to know, what brought you to be involved with Yavapai College in the first place, moons ago?
I really had in my mind for a long time that I wanted to live in Prescott, so it was partially just drawn by the place, and I started out going towards being a secondary education teacher, and so I student taught here in Prescott at Prescott High School because I wanted to get my foot in the door.
Very nice.
And then subsequent to that, I sort of stumbled into a position at the college, and that's where I ended up getting to Prescott. But I was tracking towards teaching in the high schools and ended up here in higher ed.
Very nice. How long have you been at Yavapai?
This is I'm in my 21st year, so I started in the fall of 1987.
Wow, that's very impressive.
Yeah, it turned into a career. It was supposed to be. It'd be a nice place to be for a few years,
and
then
just kind of stretched out.
20 years later, it's a career.
Very nice. I think it's a good one.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for, because you may
get it.
That's right.
Alrighty, well, I was talking to David Gorman, and he's told me that you've had a lot of different positions here at Yavapai, and you've done a whole lot of things. Could you describe some of those to me, and what's your favorite?
Well, chronologically, I started teaching in the College Learning Center in 1987. I was actually in an instructional staff position, not a faculty position. In the fall of 1988, I was hired into the faculty position that I've held ever since then. But during that time, I've done a number of different things. I was the math department chairman. I ran the honors program, as you know, for 5 years in the mid to late 90s. I was also the science and math division chair, so I oversaw the entire science and math operation. I was faculty association president 1 year. Managed to keep my fingers in lots of different areas as far as I've not been exclusively a math teacher. I've taught in the liberal studies program that we have. Taught a number of what are called connections classes, which are starting to go away, but there's still a few people who know about them.
And I still have to take one.
Oh, good for you.
Yep.
And taught Western civilization. So it's been a very diverse career here.
Wow. Are there any areas that you haven't gone into that you'd like to?
What a good question. Well, truthfully, I'm back to doing the thing that I really was the most rewarding position I ever held here, which was coordinating the honors program. And when I stopped doing it in 1999, I really was it was with a great deal of regret.
And reluctance.
And, reluctance, but I knew it was time to do other things at that particular point. But I never really figured I'd have the chance to be back in the position, and so there's really not much at this point that I would want to do that I haven't done, and I feel like I'm back doing the thing that it was the most rewarding and the most challenging for me. So
very nice.
So I'm happy to be doing what I'm doing right now.
Good. All right. Well, as far as coordinating the honors program, not necessarily this semester, but years ahead, what do you kind of see the honors program going? Where is it? What's the direction, and where would you like to see it expand or change?
Well, this is like an interview question, isn't it? When I applied for the position, that was almost exactly one of the questions.
Wow, jeez.
I can honestly say I don't have a real definite vision for what I want to see, how I want to see the honors program different in 2 years or 5 years. What I'd really like to see is, if I saw any difference, I'd like to see a little bit more financial reward for the students. Obviously, budgets, being what they are, that may or may not be possible. But I think that it's in the past it's been one of the best cash scholarships we've had. So I think just from a practical standpoint, I'd like to make sure that we're still competitive with our awards. And that's actually that's a real process. It's not like something you just wave a wand and the money appears. In terms of what we're doing, I've always been really committed to enrichment education, trying to just do things. And so I really would like to have the budget and the resources and the time to do more things. I mean, we do the big spring break trip. We try and sneak a few. Little extras in there, but I'd really like for it to be just more active, doing more things.
Where we won't have to have that restraint.
Right.
Really.
And there's an awful lot we can do that doesn't necessarily cost money, but I think that it'd be nice to feel a little bit more free to do things. And I do have one goal, and that is to, actually I'll say two goals. One is that I'd like to make sure that we're more connected to the larger community of honors programs in the country. And so I'm going to be attending a conference, a national conference, which as it turns out is in Arizona this year.
Really?
So I'll be going
That's
to
cool.
that in the spring. And then secondarily, I have a goal of trying to increase our visibility academically. I'd like to have
bring us up above the radar.
Right, and one of the things that we did in the past is we've been very successful in some national scholarship competitions, and so I'd like to.
Very cool.
That's obviously you don't have complete control over that, but with some good selection and good coaching of students, I think that we stand to. We've always done very well in national competitions, and I'd like to see that happen again.
What kind of competition would that be?
Well, I'm speaking specifically right now of the All-USA academic team, which we currently are involved in that. And it's not really a competition in the sense they call it an academic team. It's not like a college bowl type thing, but it really is it's a very competitive national scholarship screening process that is sponsored by USA Today.
Wow.
And it's very well funded, and it recognizes, at the top level, they recognize the top 20 community college students nationally. And
Wow.
in the past, we have had students reach that tier. They call it the first academic team. And we've had 3 students from Yavapai College
That's impressive.
during the time that I was running the program be on the national first team. And including one year, we had 2 students. 2 of the 20 students nationally were from here. So we have that history. I think we still have that capability with our students. So I'm hoping that we can make that happen. But again, it's a very big nationally focused competition. There's also a state level portion of that as well. So there's, and again, we do tend to do very well at the state level in that competition. But so when I say competition, it's all based on the application packets that students put together. But there's other national scholarship programs that, that we can use to kind of raise ourselves up and be visible. So obviously I'm the most important motivator for any of this is what do you, the students, stand to gain. But there's something that the college stands to gain from it as well, the college as an institution.
So bring it into the light a little bit and give it some recognition.
Right.
So.
Which is not to say that it hasn't had that the college and the college honors program, but I think we can always pump it up a little bit.
I agree. Alrighty, let's see. Over the years, Yavapai College has been doing a lot of growing. I remember seeing the old campus and all these new buildings under construction and thinking, wow, this is really amazing. I mean, what have you noticed is the largest difference in Yavapai? Is it the buildings, or is it the faculty, the students?
Well, let me think about that. Obviously the basic footprint of the campus is very similar. We still kind of are bouncing around in the same four primary buildings that were here when I came. Same institutional, early American penal colony type buildings. But so facility-wise, there's certainly been some big changes. I think I would just have to say that it's the role that technology is playing in education has been the number one change. I mean, when I first came here, there was this sort of mysterious thing that people would talk about called the internet, there was just a couple places on campus where you could maybe go and actually experience the internet.
And now there's a big computer lab
right,
upstairs.
right. Well, in every office, every student with a laptop is connected to this huge electronic community. I just remember that when the first year I was here, the first semester I was here, just getting a computer to type tests or type documents was a really pretty big thing. To have a computer in your office was, you were obviously recognized as an important person in the institution. So it's just been really pretty amazing how much the technology is just part of the background now. I mean, I couldn't conceive of doing my job without walking in and turning on the computer in the morning. And the communications between colleagues and between students and teachers. So it really, the material has changed a little bit. I mean, the way we teach has changed, obviously, but in some ways it's not that different. I mean, we're still having the same conversations about what's effective, what does it mean to, how do you measure success in the classroom, wherever the classroom is. So, and I've been around enough to see several kind of complete cycles of things, complete cycles of the pendulum, so to speak. So I'm seeing there's in some ways, there's not much new under the sun. We just have some new toys with which to do the job.
Make things even a little more complicated.
Well,
Sometimes better.
there's that. Yes, it obviously adds to the complications sometimes.
Trying to connect the Verde Valley campus and everything, but
it
functions well.
Well, that's one of the. I mean, just if we're going to get into reminiscing, one of the funny things is that all the new technology doesn't necessarily buy you better function, because when I first started teaching here, we had at the time, a pretty high-tech, state-of-the-art wireless connection between the Prescott campus and the Verde campus. It was via microwave relay towers, and we had live television beaming back and forth between Prescott and Verde campus, and we actually had networked classrooms, in effect networked, and on either campus there were camera operators who were in charge of making sure the camera was tracking the teacher, was focusing on a student who might be talking in the classroom. The operators would, if we wanted to run a videotape, they would have, they could start and stop the tape, so we could just ask for something to happen. And for us as teachers, we pretty much just taught in a classroom, and there were people in the background who were making us, who were keeping us cued right, making sure the sound was good, making sure the connection between the two classrooms was adequate. And, gradually that system aged, but it was still working. And then we said, okay, now we have to get these new high-tech classrooms with these automated connections, but there's no longer external control, so the teacher has to control the cameras, the teacher has to control all the media. So we've gone from where we could basically just sort of teach and not focus on the technology and still have the link to where now we are having to not only teach but control the equipment, manage the equipment. Well, and it's, truthfully, it didn't buy us that much more function.
Not necessarily. It might be typically a little bit of a distraction until you get used to it.
Well, it is, and as you know, and as students who are in these classrooms know, a lot of times it doesn't work.
Nope.
Whereas when in the old days it either worked or it didn't, and most of the time it did work. And like I say, it's having all this additional technology thrown in, it doesn't necessarily produce a better product.
That's very true.
So.
All right. Let's see. Mr. Sparks, I talked to him, he's told me that you've been an advocate for the faculty in instances of conflict or discrepancies with the administration. If you're comfortable with it, if you could describe some of those instances or kind of give a little bit of a background information on what was going on?
Well, pretty much somehow, for being a fairly mild-mannered person, I've always managed to find myself in the middle of controversies. So I guess one thing is that I've always found is that I've generally, even though I'm involved in controversies between faculty and administration, I've tended to be one of the people who's been more searching for the middle ground, searching for solutions than I have been, I've been more likely to try and bring things together than I have been to try and polarize things and separate them. That said, I've certainly dug my heels in a number of circumstances and said, this is not okay, and here are the reasons. So in terms of being an advocate for faculty, I was an administrator when I was the division chair is where I started, and then those positions were changed into assistant dean positions. I was originally, I felt like I was a faculty member first and an administrator secondarily, and it was very easy for me to distinguish my administrative responsibilities and roles from my responsibility and roles as a faculty member. And I felt fairly comfortable in that position. When the division chairs were re-engineered into division deans, I lasted a year in that position because I no longer felt that I had the identity that I needed as a faculty member to be a leader for faculty. I felt like I was being moved into more of a manager of faculty rather than
like a stiff position.
Right. Well, rather than, I think the proper phrase is I felt like I was a leader amongst equals when I was a division chair. When I became more of an administrator as they changed the role of the position, I felt I lost that. So my advocacy has not just been as a faculty member, it's been as a faculty supervisor. I think one of the things that I proved to be most successful at was acquiring resources for my faculty. I had a reputation for a while as being somewhat of a pirate. And the nice thing about it was, though, is that people recognized that, but they were actually glad to help sometimes. So if I was pirating other people's budgets, they were smiling about it. And I don't know if I don't know if I still have that touch or not, but there was a fine art of negotiation when you were trying to get resources for a project in your area, trying to get new classrooms or new lab equipment. And I was pretty good at making it clear that there were some real benefits to the students, to instruction, to the faculty members, and so people generally were pretty willing to compromise and negotiate. So I do have a history of, like I say, going into situations that are potentially volatile, adversarial, and people come out feeling pretty good about resolutions. Now, that's how we funded some of the honors trips, by the way.
Exactly,
So
that's what I was thinking.
That's how we were able to go overseas. The 2 times that I took trips overseas was by raiding other people's budgets, but with their knowledge and approval and their willingness and happiness to do so, because it was obviously to the producing great opportunities and benefits for the students. So other areas, gosh, I have tended to be very involved in faculty politics. Again, I don't like the sense that I'm doing it to be just ornery, but sometimes I'm ornery. But mostly, I think that I've tried to do it because of what I believe in, believe to be important in higher education, and sometimes I feel like my role is just to sort of hold up a mirror and say, this is really not working very well. We should try. We should do something different, or we should consider what it means when we're doing something like this. So, if I gave you specific examples, I'd probably have to kill you. It's one of those secret things right now.
Keep it quiet.
But I have been involved in trying to resolve, faculty issues and faculty disputes. Most recently, I served on a grievance review committee for a formal faculty grievance. And many schools, many institutions have had formalized policies by which people can go through a process of grieving what we call arbitrary administrative decisions or misuse of policy. And we have not had a functioning grievance policy for a number of years. And due to the efforts of a number of members of the faculty, we crafted this new policy, and this is horrendously boring, I'm sure, but we had a very, very confrontational grievance between a faculty member and their supervisor, and my understanding is that the grievance review committee came up with a very creative and actually workable solution that has resolved the problems as far as we know, which is what we've heard. So that's the idea. That's what I like. I don't really necessarily like to win. I just like to fix the problems.
Balance things out.
Right. Well, I'm a Libra, and Libras are always in balance. So we like to find the middle ground.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm just acting out. I'm just controlled by the stars.
Well, there you go. We all have our influences.
Right. So.
Alrighty.
So if you want more specifics, I'm more than happy to give you. But it's I've seen some pretty gruesome fights here over the years, and I've been in the middle of many of them.
Yeah, well, with many colleges, there are a lot of balancing politics and rules and growth and change.
Well,
so it's to be expected in a way.
Well, and one of my favorite phrases is that we always fight so hard about the stuff because there's so little at stake. Not because there's so much at stake. It's a really small little pond here, and we all want it to be just the way we want it to be. And there's not much at stake, but we really fight hard about it. So I don't understand it completely, but that was the climate that I became a professional under. So I learned from some people who like to fight about a lot of things.
So start a little spark and they'll flame it or bring it to a flame. All right. Well, recently there's so many more students coming to Yavapai with the growth, and I've noticed, kind of hearing through the grapevine, that there are some conflicts between perhaps the students and the dorm managers, the dorm advisors, or between teachers or anything. And do you think that might continue? Do you think that the student body is becoming a little bit more wild or unpredictable?
Well, I don't want to sound like a really old-timer. I do feel that there has been some shift in, maybe not preparedness, although some of my colleagues would argue that students are less well prepared, coming to us less well prepared than they were some number of years ago. But I think there's probably been more than preparedness. There's been more of a shift in, I don't know. I'm not quite sure how to characterize it, but there's more of a sense of kind of defiance about the process of education. Even though this is still college and it's still, in effect, it is still kind of an optional or discretionary. The students who come here do seem to have more of a sense of, what you have to offer is not of value, and these are gross generalizations, but trying to consider the student body that I encountered 20 years ago on average, and the student body I'm encountering now. I think there's a little bit more of a this sort of sense that almost defiance, I will be here, but there's only so much that I'm going to tolerate or accept that you're going to present to me. So it's the challenges are the same in a lot of ways in terms of how do you reach people, how do you make things connect for them, how do you make it relevant. Especially in mathematics, the connection is not so immediate as it might be in some other classes. Although I would argue that you have very little hope of getting through life without having to engage in some kind of problem-solving activities, and math, if nothing else, gives you some fairly handy tools to deal with the questions that you're going to run into. But again, I think it's mostly just, and I don't think that's a numbers issue. I don't think it's just the increasing size of the student body. I think it is. There have been some shifts in society.
Very true.
People talk about how you people in the younger generation, there's more of this sort of attitude of entitlement that there's because people have grown up with all of these things, access to all of these really marvelous things that we could only even have imagined, 50, 30, 20 years ago, that they're going to continue to be entitled to all those things. And so that gets us into all sorts of issues, like, we can talk globalization and all those things, but, which is really fun because, that's what critical thinking's all about.
Exactly.
It's like grabbing an idea and
analyzing, finding connections and
running with it. So.
Well, do you think they say these days that the 2-year, the associate's degree is losing its strength in today's workforce? Do you think that might have something to do with the attitude of today's student body or the size?
I think it could, although I've also heard sort of the opposite, that if we're going to be able to compete in an increasingly global economy, that we have to have a much more highly trained workforce than we have now. So people are arguing that a high school diploma as a ticket into a skilled job is really inadequate. And I've participated in some programs called School to Work. This is a few years ago now, that were specifically focused on developing curriculum that was seamless between the high school and the community college.
Wow.
That was to train people to work in high-tech jobs like bioengineering and electronics assembly. Of course, most of those jobs are now being outsourced to other countries. But the idea being that if we're going to be able to produce, if we're going to continue to have some sort of robust economy and be able to compete globally, we're going to be competing with workforces that are increasingly educated. So I would say that maybe a 2-year degree as a gateway into certain types of jobs is losing some of its relevance. I mean, there's this there's a sense that a lot more people who are going through vocational programs, including the nursing program, for instance, have a sense that, I can stop out for a brief time after I finish my associate's degree, but to really be able to proceed in my profession, I need to have the BSN, for instance. So, so there's maybe not quite as much of a boost that you would get from an associate's now as there was a few years ago. But I really don't think that it's losing its relevance as a tool to move people forward in their goals, whether it be employment or transfer to another school or just general knowledge.
Yeah,
so,
enrichment.
So maybe I'm being naive, but I think that we still have a lot to offer in the community colleges, and maybe this is time for me to get on one of my soapboxes.
Go ahead.
But this is another one of these things, and maybe this ties back to something you asked a minute ago, and that is, one of the few areas that I think the United States still has a real competitive advantage over other economies in the world is in our education system, our system of higher ed.
I agree.
And that's also one of the areas that we are most seriously undercutting ourselves at this point in time.
Yeah.
We're devaluing to some extent higher ed. We are lowering standards, both deliberately and inadvertently, I think. The fact that we have so many schools granting degrees that require very little in the way of seat time, very little, so many classes, even in our institution, where the learning outcomes are really subject to question. I mean, are we really producing people who have the same skill set, who take, and I'm not singling out any programs or people, but say take anatomy and physiology as a strictly online class versus people who are taking anatomy and physiology where they're in the lab, where it's hands-on. And so I think as we continue to kind of undercut the standards of higher ed, first of all, we're reducing potentially our knowledge base, our skill base, and secondly, there are many people who from India, from China, from any number of countries who've come to the United States to become educated, who've gone back to their home countries,
Wow.
and who are now either in the, not just in the workforce, but in the, who are leaders in business, leaders in education. There's this big hungry world out there that's kind of right on our heels, who are bootstrapping themselves up in terms of their educational system. I mean, they're going to be able to produce all the people that all the skilled workers, all the engineers, all the software designers. Very soon they're going to be able to do that in-house, and the one area that we still have some edge is potentially at risk there. So that's my pitch for why we have to hold.
That's very true.
We have to hold fast to standards and have high expectations, and because it's really our one place where we still have an edge. We can't outcompete people in terms of our productivity much longer. American workers are still more productive than other workers in the world, but only by a small margin. So all these things that we've based our economic and political success on are starting to be eroded.
Yeah. Do you think part of that might have to do with the work ethic of students, or?
Well, I'll wait and judge that based on what I see from your guys' journals and portfolios, and I'll see how the honors program students, if they're still willing to work hard on those things. I don't know. I think there's so much more going on in people's lives these days. I don't know if the work ethic is any worse. Maybe, like I said, that mentioned that sense of entitlement that's there. It's like maybe I don't have to work as hard because I really am entitled to this sort of thing.
Exactly, just hand me that degree now.
Right. But I don't know that fundamentally if the work ethic is really any worse. I still see some students just pouring their hearts into their education, working long hours to get the grades they want. So, I mean, I don't want to sound like an old codger and say, yeah, people just don't care anymore, but because I think they really do. I don't. If I really got to the point where I felt like anything I had to offer was not being received with any sort of appreciation or acceptance, then I would be looking for something else to do. I hope.
For 20 years, it's worked out for you.
Well,
21.
Yeah, mostly. I mean, there's been setbacks. But again, every now and again I sit back and say, okay, what professionally would I have wanted to do differently at this point in my life? And I really don't think much.
That's good. That's good.
Maybe I would have said, maybe if I'd stuck around and got a PhD in something, but that wasn't really what I was drawn to. I've always been drawn to being a teacher in one way or another.
Very nice.
So I guess it's kind of I'm doing what I really feel like I'm doing what I was training for from when I was in high school, because I started teaching, not academically, but I was teaching things like rock climbing and skiing and outdoor classes when I was in high school. So I was an educator long before I ever thought I'd be a teacher.
Well, are they different, or are they the same thing?
No, they really aren't. That's really one of my first and very early lessons was that talking to a student who was feeling intimidated and overwhelmed and frightened by the prospects of completing a math course or how they were going to do on a test. I found that the language I was using to coach a student like that was almost identical to the language I would use to coach a student who was climbing and who was scared,
same kind of challenges,
and same sort of self-imposed limitations too. So it was really amazing to me, because I'm sitting here. I could essentially say to a person who's doing a climb, well, first of all, if you say you can't do something, you certainly won't be able to do it, and you have to kind of open yourself up to the prospect of being successful as you do this. And you have to realize that you have a safety net here, and that trying and not being successful might mean that you're going to slip and fall a little bit, but you're not going to get hurt.
You'll learn from it.
You'll learn from it. So you just sort of start switching a few words around. All of a sudden, you're talking to somebody about, well, you really just need to leave yourself open to the possibility that you actually can do this stuff. You can do math.
Exactly.
So that was it was kind of a funny realization, and obviously it's not exactly the same because there's a physical aspect to something like rock climbing, but still the psychological part of it's a lot the same.
Good, yeah.
So that was so I guess by having spent a lot of time helping people cope with their fears and their sense of limitations, it prepared me pretty well to step into a classroom.
Good. I think it kind of that ability to educate could probably transpire onto a lot of people, including students helping other students and so forth.
Well, and that's part of the idea that education is not necessarily a solitary pursuit. I mean, we are judged individually, but we should recognize that there is a cooperative element to learning, and there is a learning community. I mean, we use that word. We talk about the learning community. We ought to do more with it.
Good. I think so too. We have an amazing amount of resources at Yavapai. It's fantastic. And as far as Yavapai goes, what do you see in its future? And its, specifically anything in its faculty, its students, the building? Anything that you can imagine in your mind's eye clearly or vividly?
Well, I have this really kind of one of many little fantasies, I suppose. But I've sort of had this dream that we're going to have this, there's this big swing that we're in the middle of right now towards, virtual classrooms and, learning on demand and
online
all of these things that are kind of the current buzzwords that are sort of decentralizing education and moving it out of the traditional classroom, the traditional interaction between students and educators, students and students. And so I guess, maybe I don't see this as our future, but I have this dream that there's going to be a backlash to that eventually. There's going to be a real movement, and I can see this happening. I think there's maybe some very small beginnings of this, as a matter of fact, but I think that people are going to be more critical about accepting something that is, canned, that has less human aspect to it, less interaction.
Interaction, feeling.
And so I think that the traditional bricks and mortar classroom is not really threatened so much as it's going to be revalued. I think the long term, and maybe I'm naive, is that we're going to have a real swing back to let's get back in the classroom as a community of learners face to face, because technology, no matter how good you make it, will never replace that presence.
Never.
You just can't get the same juice, if you will, the same electricity in a online chat room or even in a live video conference that you would have in a classroom. And again, I use technology daily. I am not a Luddite, but I think that there's something fundamentally lacking. If it becomes the sole means by which an education is gained is through the use of the technology. So I think that there will be, and I hope that there will be a revaluing of the traditional learning experience, and that it will become something that is seen as critical as part of a broad spectrum of learning opportunities or learning methods. So that's my hope and vision. Students are going to be, the students in the community college system are going to continue to be coming to us in whatever state they are in terms of their preparation, in terms of whatever they need, whatever they perceive they need to be successful in their personal lives and their business lives. So that's one of the beauties of the community college system, is that it really is designed to be kind of open-ended,
Yeah.
no bottom floor. There's going to be something there for almost everybody. So I don't see that we have that the community college system is at risk at this point in time. I think that we have as much future in higher education in the United States as we've ever had. And again,
I agree.
these are systems that are being copied and modeled around the world. There are, literally, we are exporting our community college system model to other countries. As a matter of fact, our current college president was involved in establishing the equivalent of a community college system in the United Arab Emirates.
Wow.
Before he came here. So
Very
that's
cool.
exactly what he did, was to help set up, and was the chancellor or provost, I forget what his title was, of a system that was very closely modeled after an existing system in the United States. So again, we have something to offer to the world, but if we give it all away and at the same time undo the good stuff that we're doing here already,
True.
We lose that edge.
So I've always appreciated Yavapai a great deal, and I'm very glad I came here before ever going to a large university.
Well, we have lots of reasons to think that, and evidence to suggest that the students who spend 2 years in our programs here and then go on to four-year schools, either in-state or out-of-state, they tend to do better than the students who were native at the university, who did their first 2 years at the same school. So it's, we think, we being the faculty, think that we are doing a pretty good job with getting people through the sophomore level material, and so.
All right, very good. Well, I think we're at about an hour now. So
Close.
Should we continue, or?
It's entirely up to you. I'm paid by the word, so you gotta figure that I'll talk. As long as the meter's running, I'll be talking. So.
All right. Well, I don't know how I went. No, Matt went for quite a while.
I know. Well, this is going to be part of an archive. I ought to say some of my favorite phrases.
All right, go ahead.
Because I'm notorious for saying in meetings when things are getting people are being kind of cranky and kind of obstreperous and not really paying attention to what's going on. My favorite phrase has become, and people actually will now say it for me instead of waiting for me to say it, is that this problem is neither new nor unique.
And I think that's a good saying.
So yeah, we'll be fighting about something, and then someone will. It used to be me who would say it, but now it's other people will say it too. This is neither new
or unique.
Yes.
So take a second to think about it.
Right. No, I don't really have a whole lot more to add.
All right.
It's really, if people really want to get into the dirt of the college, I could probably pull out a few things, but it's, I have always enjoyed being an employee of Yavapai College. There's been very, very few times when I've ever felt like I wanted to be somewhere else. And
Good.
So any discontent I have is generally not lodged with the college and what the college does.